All right, thank y'all for meeting us here today. So today we're going to go over the Chapter 5, Design Your Visuals. My name's Christian.
I'm Carly.
I'm Gopika.
I'm Zach. Now, we know that we did hear a little bit about it last Tuesday, but we're going to go over it again and just give you all a little more clarity here. So, design your visuals overview here. So what you're going to do when you're designing your visuals and your PowerPoints is you're going to start with your titles. Now, this saves some time and focus for people. It helps them focus in on what the main idea is. You're going to design a basic template. So you just want to have it, not too cluttered. You want to keep it clear and concise. Think visually as you design what's going to attract an audience's attention in forms of, like the color schemes, everything that you have going on in your PowerPoint presentation. And you want to edit your efforts. So this is just to make sure your messages are clear and correct. Now, on this first one here, we're going to have the titles. So this is just identifying what the audience needs to see. So you're going to first reinforce your structure. Now, that's going to include having like a title page, an agenda on your PowerPoint, certain section headers, a summary of your final presentation, and then a closing slide as well. Now, you also want to emphasize main messages. This is going to include focusing on the objective and using a storyboard if need be to help your presentation flow well. The third point here is draw attention to supporting points. Now you're going to find your strongest supporting points and use strong, powerful visuals to reinforce those. The fourth thing here is to help you respond to important questions. One of the best ways to do this is have a practice Q&A within your team, or if you're presenting alone, with yourself there. This is going to be a little bit more about the titles and just some clarity here. Now these two first points of specifying your point and speed up information sharing, they kind of go hand in hand. So if you put those main ideas inside your title, it's going to help specify the point and get the main message across to everyone. Right here, the create standalone sense. Now, this is just, if you weren't presenting your PowerPoint presentation, you'd want to make sure that it made sense to somebody who was just going through it on their own. You want to influence design decisions. Now, this is going to, this is where you'll create images if need be, certain things like graphs, charts, to help your presentation. And then you're going to adapt to the situation. So if in the end you've made all these graphs and charts and you just realize it's a little cluttered, it's too much, you're going to want to delete things that you don't need. You're going to want to add things if need be as well. Just whatever makes sense to the presentation itself. Now I'm going to hand you over to Carly here.
Okay. I'm going to tell you how to design your basic template and pick your color schemes. Russell Munner suggests that you should consider the audience, choose a background color, select title and text colors, pick a spot color, and include dimming options, and make sure all your colors work together. It suggests that instead of using like regular PowerPoint templates, you should create your own so it's easier to customize to fit the context of your presentation. And then audience reactions can be based on multiple factors, some of which are religion, culture, and colorblindness, and you're going to want to make sure that you adapt your presentation to accommodate all those needs. Next, when you choose a background color, it depends on what kind of visuals you want to have. If you have projected images, you can use dark backgrounds so it can make your presentation look more vibrant. And then if you have printed decks, it's better to use white or beige or light colors because whenever you use bold or dark colors, the ink can look streaky and it could be expensive to print. And then for black and white printouts, you just want to make sure that you don't have large filled in dark shapes because if you print two-sided, it can bleed through the other side. And then selecting title and text colors, you want to pick contrasting colors from your background so they stand out. Like if you have a blue slide, white, yellow, or pink text colors will stand out, or if you have a white deck page, black, bold, or dark text colors will look okay. And then your spot color is basically your accent color. You want to use it for your most important information so it stands out to the audience. And then you want to use it sparingly so it's not too busy on the page. And then the dimming option is essentially the opposite of your spot color. You use it for less important information and typically use a gray or a variant of your background color. And then last, you just want to make sure all your colors work together, and you can do that with the custom color screen and make sure your colors aren't too busy and they mesh well. And then next, you have your two design options. You have your typography decisions and your simple layouts. For typography, you want to limit yourself to 1 or 2 fonts, and then this slide has 2 fonts, but they are both from the same font family, so they work together. And then you want to enhance readability, which just means create text that's big enough for your audience to read. Make sure there's space in between your text, and don't use all capital letters. And then simple layouts, solid backgrounds are typically your best bet, and they're typically pretty safe. With placeholders, those are any space that hold your headers, your footers, your titles, or your text. And you just want to make sure with your backgrounds, if you have color, that you edit your placeholders so they can stand out and they're not altered. And then add graphics with meaning. That just means don't add photos just to fill space. You want them to add to your presentation. And then I'm going to pass it on to Zach, that's going to tell us about thinking visually as you design.
Thank you. Alrighty, so, Alright, so thinking visually as you design. So once you have a well-designed template, you want to make sure that you start thinking about what you're going to put into your presentation, what you're going to put into your slides. So you can use visual aids to convey your message in a way that just using words or text can't. So the visual aids that I'm going to be going over today are charts, diagrams, and photographs, which I'll get to in the next slide. So with charts, you're turning numbers into meaning. So basically you're making numbers easier to comprehend. You want to make sure that you know your message, and you want to make sure you know the comparison that you're making. Once you have those two things, that's when you start choosing the right chart form. So selecting the chart form is key. If you use a wrong chart form, then it's going to make the information more confusing for your audience, which is counterintuitive. So charts make your quantitative information easier to comprehend, when diagrams make your qualitative information easier to comprehend. The two areas that diagrams cover are relationships and sequences. They help emphasize things like interactions and comparisons and structure. It's important to make sure you match your diagram with your meaning. And going along with that, photographs. So photographs should also match your what you're talking about. Here you see just a well-placed photograph, but say if I was giving a presentation on like inflation or something, if I just put a random picture of a hurricane, then it really would just distract from what you're talking about and make no sense. So make sure you use the right photograph for what you're talking about. And going along with something that could ruin your presentation, using too much text could just ruin the slide. I mean, this is not a good slide. Just too much words, it's hard for the audience to even read, and it's daunting. Like, no one wants to read all that. So make sure that you keep it simple and keep the formatting consistent. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Gopika.
Okay, so the final step of when creating a presentation is to edit your work. It's very unlikely that you'll get through making a whole presentation and make no mistakes. So you're going to want to go through your presentation and take these steps to make sure that you have fixed all the problems that could possibly cause errors during your actual presentation. And let's start with clear structure. So it's really important to have a clear structure, or like a similar structure all the way throughout your presentation, so you don't want to distract or confuse your audience from if the topic has changed from what the past slide was. And you can do this by showing progress, and by this it means to continuously repeat the first slide. So if, say, the overview slide had all the topics of what was going to be discussed in this presentation, you could highlight each section before you talked about that section and replay that slide over and over again. But that could, in some presentations like this one, where we have a slide limit, not be applicable. So another thing that we can do is to have clear titles that show exactly what we're talking about and direct that back to what we said we would be discussing. And the next thing that we can do is track. So by track we mean giving more emphasis on information by using different colors or pointers such as arrows or something to emphasize certain information on a page that needs to be highlighted, so that we won't forget to talk about that during the presentation. So the next thing we're going to talk about is enhancing visuals. So that means that we have to use a similar color scheme throughout the whole presentation and not be too vibrant with what we use, but also not be too dull and boring, so that it doesn't lose the interest of the audience. And then I'm going to clump both of these next two ones together, which is chart junk as well as graphics and pointers. So it's always good to use those in a minimalistic but in a good way, so that it does add to your presentation and add to the information that you're trying to portray, but it does not take away or distract from the actual speaking, because that is the presentation. And finally, we're going to talk about proof. So you're always going to, the main errors that a lot of people make is proofing just your typing and your spelling and making sure that your phrasing is consistent. So if you have a bulleted list, you don't want one bullet to be a full sentence and the next one to be a fragment of a sentence, and then continuously have a disarray of different types of bullets. You want it to be similar throughout. And also always make sure to cite all your sources so that we can't get in trouble for plagiarizing or anything like that. So up here, I just have a slide from our last presentation, and that top one would be a good example of how to use the things that we've talked about in our presentation, where we had used pointing to highlight specific sentences or words that need to be emphasized, and the diagram shows a transition of information and how it flows. And then the bottom one would be a really bad one. Obviously we all know that we don't put a lot of word on the page. And so yeah, finally we talked about starting with your titles, designing a basic template, think visually as you design so that you don't over complicate your presentation, and finally edit your efforts so that you catch your mistakes before you are finished.